Right now at 6, settlement reached. How much the police union will reportedly pay Joanne Hardesty after the then commissioner was falsely accused of committing a crime. Plus,
at least, make people think twice before, being so reckless.
She lost her daughter to street racers. A mother's plea as one of the drivers involved makes a deal.
And later, making the grade?
It's not consistent, it's not across the board, and we know that's not enough.
The bright spots and the struggles that show there's much more work to do to get Oregon students back on track.
Thanks for joining us. I'm David Molko.
And I'm Laurel Porter. We begin with significant new developments in the case of a newborn baby found dead a decade ago. She quickly became known as Baby Precious after her tiny body was discovered at a Portland recycling center. Police quickly made public appeals, though for years there wasn't enough evidence or clues to help figure out her identity or who may have been responsible. Today, that changed.
So let's get right to Catherine Cook at Portland Police North Precinct. Catherine, before we get to the suspect here, we understand you have also learned that baby's real name.
Yes, David. After 10 years, we now know the baby's name was Amara. Also today, police announced they have charged the baby's father in her death. Back in 2013, Amara's body was discovered among recyclables at EFI Recycling. Detectives spent years trying to figure out who she was and how she got there. Then in 2019, cold case detective Brendan McGuire took over the case. He sent tissues from the baby to a forensics lab. After another 3 years of hurdles, that DNA finally led them to a family connection and eventually the baby's father. Today, the U.S. Marshals arrested that man, 53-year-old Alnath Omar Oliver. That search ended a long search for many they've been waiting for.
But for me personally, anytime we get to close a cold case, I feel very good about it. It's a sort of a passion of mine, cold cases. But with such a particular victim in this case, such vulnerability, it was very, very fulfilling to close this one.
The mother in this case was only 15 when she gave birth. Detectives say Oliver kept her from going to the hospital. Instead, he told her he was taking the baby there after she was born. But investigators say that baby died on the way, and that is when Oliver is accused of putting her in the recycling bin. Today, Oliver is facing multiple charges, including concealing the baby's birth as well as manslaughter. So many other communities stepped up at that time to try to bring closure to this unknown baby, and that included planting this yellow rose bush on what would have been Amara's 3rd birthday. You can see there's one single rose blooming today, seeming very appropriate. Tonight at 11, we'll hear from some of those community members and how this news has impacted them. Laurel and David, back to you.
It's such a heartbreaking story, but we're grateful that baby Amara may finally get justice. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, also developing this evening, a settlement between former Portland City Commissioner Joanne Hardesty and the city's police union. Evan Watson is here now. Evan, walk us through what this is all about.
Yeah, it's a great question. This relates back to a case from 2021. Hardesty sued the Portland Police Union and 2 officers over a 2021 incident in which she was wrongly implicated in a hit and run. Instead of going to trial next week, Hardesty, the police union, and 2 officers have settled for $680,000, that figure according to OPB. In that 2021 case, a driver wrongly told a 911 dispatcher that Hardesty rear-ended her car and drove away. Then police union president Brian Hunsaker leaked the allegation to the Oregonian. A police investigation determined Hardesty was not involved. Hardesty said the leak was a racist and politically motivated attempt to smear her reputation. She sued the city, the police union, Hunsaker, and Carrie Ottoman, another PPB officer involved in the leak. Hardesty settled with the city in August for $5,000. Mayor Ted Wheeler also wrote her a signed apology. Today, Portland Police Association President Aaron Schmautz said insurance stepped in before the case went to trial, saying, in this case, the PPA's insurance carrier made the business decision to settle. The PPA is pleased to have this matter behind it. We reached out to Hardesty and her legal team for comment, but so far we haven't heard back. Hardesty did tell OPB the settlement holds the police union and officers accountable for their wrongful conduct and said she hopes to prevent something like this from happening again. David.
Thank you, Evan. Appreciate that update. Let's get to your headlines now, beginning in Tigard, where a mother who was hit by a car earlier this week has now died. Just before 9 Monday night, authorities say 45-year-old Maria Negrete was riding with her boyfriend on Hall Boulevard when they stopped in the center lane to retrieve something in the road. Police say she was hit and died Wednesday in the hospital. Negrete leaves behind 5 children, the youngest 10 years old. At this point, there is still no description of the suspect's vehicle.
Low-income working parents in need of state subsidies to be able to afford child care are now being put on a wait list. The Oregonians reporting that Oregon Early Learning doesn't have enough money to meet the overwhelming surge in demand after the eligibility guidelines were loosened. They say some families could be on the wait list for 18 months. Households with very low incomes or referrals by child welfare officials will continue to get priority. Oregon Early Learning's director said the agency will seek an additional $50 million from the state in the next legislative session.
With summer coming to a close and rain on the way, fire officials in Clark County are rolling back some fire restrictions. Starting Saturday, recreational fires in unincorporated parts of the county will once again be permitted. Now, keep in mind, all fires must be contained in approved pits away from structures and combustibles with flames no bigger than 3 feet. However, there is still a ban in place on burning yard debris and slash piles until at least October 1st, depending on fire conditions.
And rain and heavy fog in eastern Oregon led to a multi-vehicle crash on Interstate 84, completely closing down the highway from Pendleton to LeGrand, still closed. This is what it looked like on ODOT cameras on 84 through the Blue Mountains earlier this afternoon, and as you can tell, visibility pretty limited. OSP tells us 2 semi-trucks caught fire in the crash. No word yet on how many people might have been injured. Farther east, more crashes and rock slides caused partial closures on 84 between Baker City and the Idaho state line. Matt?
Thanks, Laurel. You know, that rainy weather is pushed as far west as Mount Hood. This is live from Timberline Lodge right now, and you can see the rain on the lens. Hasn't been a lot of rain on Mount Hood, generally less than 1/10 of an inch, but it's chilly. It's only 40 degrees up there at 6,000 feet. The rain has been heavy in eastern Oregon, the areas you were just telling us about along I-84. Meacham, 2/3 of an inch of rain. Pendleton, over 1/2 inch of rain. LeGrand, 2/10 of an inch of rain, and 2/10 over in Hermiston. Even up in Walla Walla and Pullman, they've had some pretty decent rain. Don't worry, Beaver fans and Cougar fans. If you're going to the game in Pullman on Saturday afternoon, it should be dry for the game there. Also down in Eugene, the weather will be dry for the Ducks. Okay, so you see the rain is also heavy in the mountains of Idaho here, but that system is winding down. You can watch it all here, and the clouds pushing into the northern Oregon Cascades. This whole package, though, is slipping to the south and east and will weaken and fade away. In eastern Oregon, just like western Oregon did today, you will get a dry final day of summer. You can see on Doppler radar, though, that rain extending right up to about Mount Hood, and then some clouds spilling over into the valleys right now, but not that much. So we are looking at a transition to very wet weather beginning really Sunday night and into Monday and Tuesday. We may get a couple of showers on Saturday night. Not a big deal there, but it will be a big deal as we go to next week. We've got the possibility for debris flows and landslides on the wildfire burn scars, and we may actually make up our monthly rainfall deficit, which is quite large right now, by the end of next week. Laurel, David?
Here it comes. Thank you, Matt. She was 26 years old and waiting at a bus stop when Ashley McGill was suddenly struck by street racers and her life cut short. Today, one of the drivers involved in that race made a deal with prosecutors.
And our Tim Gordon was in the courtroom. Tim, tell us what happened.
Well, you know, this was a horrible crash, Laurel. It happened just over a year ago. And today in court, one of the street racers involved agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge. Just 26 years old and a young mother, Ashley McGill's family says she always had a smile and was up for adventure. Her life cut short early in the morning of August 27th at Southeast Stark Street and 133rd Avenue. Today, one of the drivers admitted his responsibility for her death.
To the charge, count 1, criminally negligent homicide, the lesser included offense. How do you plead, sir?
Guilty.
Kenneth Joseph Freeman had been facing a charge of second-degree manslaughter, but today pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide. He was sentenced to 60 months or 5 years in prison. Prosecutors say Freeman was one of 3 drivers who were racing side by side down Stark Street at speeds over 80 miles an hour. The cars collided, and one of them went off the roadway, hitting Ashley. It wasn't the car driven by Freeman, but his involvement took a life. Freeman has a lengthy criminal history, but never anything like this. Ashley's mom had a message for Freeman in court.
I said, I hope that, that he changes, his life and his choices he makes and does something positive, or turns that negative into a positive and makes, contributes to society rather than do what he's done, been in a revolving door at the jail.
And as for her daughter, she says life hasn't been the same without her. Devastated, but not allowing her death to be in vain.
I miss her. I hope that she up there and sees me trying to get justice for her and stop the street racing and at least make people think twice before being so reckless.
And Freeman's Oregon driver's license is revoked for life. Now, police say another man named Jonathan Pena was the driver who actually hit Ashley. He was seriously injured in the crash but survived. And just last month, he was indicted in this case. But so far, he's not been taken into custody. Back to you.
Yeah, make people think twice. Such an important message there from Ashley's mother. Thank you, Tim.
And now to new test scores for students across Oregon. And though there are some bright spots, the numbers appear overall to be pretty dismal.
Let's bring in Thomas Schultz in the newsroom. Thomas, it sounds like students in Portland are actually doing better than most. But first, what's the big picture here?
David and Laurel, across the state and even in Portland, there's a steep drop-off from scores before the pandemic. Test results are particularly bad for older students. Just over 40% of Oregon middle schoolers are on track in English courses. That's a drop of more than 10% from those pre-pandemic numbers. And in high school, the numbers are even worse. A few years ago, 2/3 of juniors were on pace in English. That's plummeted by more than 20%. In math, only 1/4 of 8th graders are proficient and just 1/5 of high school juniors. Though there is a silver lining, these scores are a slight uptick from last year's results, and the biggest school district in Oregon is far ahead of the rest of the state. Portland Public School students are testing much better in English and math. They're also outperforming their PPS peers from a year ago. Still, administrators say there's plenty of room to improve.
We're on the right track, that we're showing acceleration for students who historically we've been continually concerned about and remain vigilant in narrowing those opportunity gaps.
Narrowing opportunity gaps, David, especially for minority students. Administrators have seen some growth, but it's not consistent at all schools, though now they do believe they have a plan in place to be successful.
Thomas Schultz in the newsroom, a first step there. Thanks, Thomas.